Hey everybody, Hunter back again from Showtime Studios. This video here is going to be a tutorial on how to make your AMT tractor kits as far as semi-tractors. The front I-beam on them steerable. And what I have here is the one that's actually going in my California hauler Peterbilt day cab that I'm doing. And stay tuned, there's a video coming up on that, on the progress we've got done on it. And as you can see, that's the way that the I-beam pretty much comes in the kit. It's just solid all the way across, and we went ahead and made both steering knuckles movable on both sides. And that's the tutorial. I'm going to show you how quick and easy this is to do. So we'll pan the camera down here, and I'll show you what all we're going to be working with, and we'll get started on the tutorial. Okay, don't need a whole lot to do this. Of course, you're going to need your I-beam, and a lot of the truck kits out there today do have steerable axles on them, but a lot of the AMTs do not. So just start with this fixed AMT I-beam, and we're going to be using a piece of 20 thousandths steel rod. It's actually piano wire, and that size is, you can use whatever works the best on what you're doing. I found on the AMT kits that the 20 thousandths works pretty good, and we also have a 20 thousandths bit in the pin vise, and hobby knife with a brand new number 11 blade in it. We're going to be using some liquid Model Master glue, and I also have over here the super glue, the accelerator, a toothpick, and the tweezers, and that's for another step if we're going to need it in this. I'm not sure. I'll find out once we get it cut. And if we do need those items, we'll be using these two pieces of white plastic here, or maybe just one of them. This is actually 10 thousandths plastic that's just been cut in little squares, and they're actually going to be used for shims if we need them. And I also have two tiki train bolts here that I've cut just the washer and the bolt head off. And we're going to use that for a little bit of added detail at the very end. So I'm going to go ahead and zoom the camera in here a little bit more, and we'll get started on the tutorial. Okay, so what we want to do first is you're going to have the round spot on the top and the bottom of your spindle where it would actually simulate the kingpin. And I've already cleaned the mold lines up in this area. That's one thing you want to do before you start on this process, is get all the mold lines cleaned up the best that you can. And once we get it cut here, I will show you how to clean up the rest of the mold lines that are actually down in these little open areas in here. And see if we can point to it. This area right through here where the knife blade's going in, very hard to clean that up with the spindle fixed, but once we get the spindle out of the way, that's a pretty easy area to clean up. So get the mold line sanded down and make sure you've got a pretty flat surface on the top and the bottom of the kingpin area, or the spindle. And we'll go ahead and just cut one side here is all we're going to do for the tutorial. The other side's the same way. So I'm just going to take the drill bit, and I'm going to hold it right in the center of the round part where the kingpin would be. And when you're drilling this, you want to make sure that it's parallel with your kingpin both ways. You want to check it looking at it like this, and then you want to turn it up on end and make sure that the bit is going parallel down through there, because you want this hole to be the same diameter all the way through. And normally what I do is I try to drill down about halfway from the top, and then I will come up from the bottom and drill the rest of the way through. And to check and see how far you've went down into that spindle, just pull the bit back out and clean it off, and then put the bit all the way down till it bottoms out. Put your thumbnail right against the top of the spindle and pull it back out, and you can kind of measure how far that the bit has went down in there. Like I say, you want to go about halfway from the top, and then flip it over and go the rest of the way from the bottom. So we're going to go just a little bit more. And now we're going to flip it over, and we're going to go back to the center of that round part, just like we did at the top. And the one thing that you want to try to keep from happening is having the drill bit walk on you. You want to make sure that you keep that as much in the center of that spindle as you can. And now we're just going to drill up from the bottom. I'm going to check it here and make sure that I'm going straight. Everything's looking good. And one thing you don't want to do is hold your finger over top of this part up here where you've drilled the hole at the top, because once this bit breaks through, it'll pretty much go directly through your finger, and that doesn't feel very good. I've done it, and it smarts a little bit, so don't do that. Hold it on the side like this, so if the drill bit pushes through, it just pushes into the air and not into your finger. So we're pretty close to being all the way through. I'm going to go back to the top now and drill down a little bit. I'll take a little bit out, and this is when I kind of start flipping it back and forth from top to bottom. And what you're trying to do is just get those two points to line up. And some of these spindles, the plastic can be pretty hard up inside of them, so it takes a little bit of pressure to get through them. And like I say, you just want to take your time on this part here and don't get in no hurry with it, because you want to make sure that this hole stays pretty true and doesn't get bigger than the size pin that you're going to put in it. Because if it does, what's going to happen is you're going to have a bunch of slop where the spindle goes onto the I-beam, and that's going to translate, once you put the weight of the model down on the wheels and tires, the camber is going to fall in and be negative. And of course on a truck you do not have negative or positive camber. The wheels are pretty much straight up and down. And we just made it all the way through with the drill bit, and like I say, I flip it over and just make sure that it goes in and goes all the way through on the top and the bottom. Okay, so when you've got it drilled through, it should look like this here. And see if we can get the camera to focus in here on it. And for some reason or another, the camera does not want to focus at all. But that's what you want it to look like. We've drilled down through it. You can see it's straight with the kingpin. So after you get that through there, the next thing that I do is just check the steel rod that you're going to be using and make sure that it does slide down through there. And as you can see, we've got the steel rod inserted into that. So that's just, like I say, just a check to make sure that everything is good to go there. And the next step that we're going to do is the actual cutting of the I-beam. And what you want to make sure that you do as far as when you get ready to cut this is make your first cut at the bottom of the I-beam and make the next cut at the top of the I-beam. Don't get away from the I-beam. You want this cut to be right with the same width of the I-beam at the end. So all we're going to do is we're just going to set the I-beam down, and we're going to keep the knife parallel with the outer piece of the I-beam, and we're just going to basically push the knife blade down into the plastic. We're going to make a straight cut all the way through it. Now some people will probably say, why don't you cut through this with a saw? And I'm going to tell you why. You could use a photo etch saw blade, but remember that every time that you cut through with any type of saw blade, you've got what they call the kerf, and that is the material that the teeth of the blade has taken out. And when you cut through with these number 11s that are brand new and sharp, you minimize the gap that's left. So that's why I do not recommend cutting through with a saw. So we've got through the first part. Now we're moving on to the bottom. And we're just going to do the same thing. We're going to push the knife through. And basically what you want to do is just have a extension of the I-beam when you're done. And that's what it should look like. And that's where we have the hole that goes through the I-beam. And that part I was talking about on cleaning up the mold lines, once you get that spindle out of the way, you can go ahead and finish cleaning up the mold line that's trapped down underneath of it, top and the bottom. And you don't want to get over here where you just cut this and take any material off of that, because if you do, you're going to have to add these little shim pieces back in that I made here. Sometimes you have to go in and straighten things up in there, and if you do, the material that you take off of this area where the hole is drilled, you're going to have to add back on with these little shims. So that's why we made those, just to show you where we use them and why. But we've got this cleaned up, and we didn't have to touch anything up there at the spindle or at the end of the I-beam. And the other thing you want to do is when you put this back together, you want to make sure that you have your spindle going the right direction. Now, as you can see there, the spindle's kind of kicked uphill a little bit. That's because it's actually upside down. So make sure you get the spindle back in the right position like that. And the next thing that you're going to do is just kind of set that right back into position and take your metal pin. And I usually go from the top side down. Since this is a pretty tight fit, I'm going to go ahead and start it into the spindle first. And then we will line it up on the I-beam. And I think I might have just flipped this thing over again. Yes, I did. I flipped it over again. That's why I say be very careful with that and make sure you get it indexed back the way it was. And then it's just a matter of pressing the pin down through until it's flush with the bottom of the spindle. And you'll see that it come out the bottom of the spindle just a little bit right there. What you want to make sure of is you push that up so it's flush with the bottom of the spindle. Now the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take the knife, the tip of the knife, and I'm actually going to push that pin up just a little bit, about maybe a 32nd of an inch up away from the bottom of the spindle. And the reason why we do that is we're going to trim the pin off now. And you just take your side cutters or whatever you're working with and snip that pin off, and you won't get all the way down against the top of the spindle, so that's why we pushed it up a little bit. And now you just take the knife blade and push it down, and it should be captured within the spindle itself. After you get that part done, and this is a little detail item I do. I mean, you don't have to do it this way. You can actually put, leave it as is, but I like to come in and put just a drop of glue on the top and the bottom here. And I'm going to take the number 11 blade and just lightly press into my washer and nut from Tiki Train. And we're going to line that up right over top of the hole. We're going to take one and we're going to do the same thing at the bottom. And this is just a little detail that I put in. It covers up the hole, and it just, when you're dry brushing the chassis and final detail, it just gives you something else, for the judges and stuff to look at. And it just looks a lot more finished. But, you can choose whichever way you want to do this part, whether you want to leave it out or, use a different, like a round disc or something like that. I like to use the little Tiki Train bolts. Gives you a nice detail. And that's all there is to it. There you'll see that the spindle actually moves, and we don't have slop in it up and down. Now, like I say, if you did put this together and you had slop up and down, you could go ahead and push that pin back out of there, and put these little shims in between the spindle and the I-beam, and it'll take up that distance. But this is looking pretty good here. And just repeat the same thing on the other side, and you have a steerable front suspension. So the next thing that you would have to do after that would be to create the drag link and make the steering box so that it has a pivot on it. And if anybody's interested, we may do videos on that along the way, because I will be doing them on the California Hauler project. So if anybody wants to see how you go about making those and making everything pivot, let me know, and we'll go ahead and do a tutorial on those as I'm doing them on the build. But that's all there is to making a AMT front I-beam steerable, and this may work on other I-beams also, like Revella Germany. It could possibly work on those. You just have to look at what you have and see if this technique will work. But that's about all we've got for this video. I'd like to thank you for watching and supporting Showtime Studios, and we'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.